Hello and welcome to the EO Roundtable series where we speak to optics experts about trends that are impacting our industry and beyond. I'm your host, Scott Bass, and today's topic is talent in the optics industry. Every industry has their share of recruitment and retention challenges. The reality is that it's typically a candidate-driven market in our industry, which means companies need to be creative about attracting and retaining top technical talent. For part 2 of this topic, we will continue our discussion with our own Edmund Optics technical talent, honing in on retention, internal versus external talent, and using independent contractors and consultants. So we talked a lot about attracting new talent, so let's talk about retention. And I'm sure you guys probably won't admit it, but top talent, I'm sure, gets lured with offers from time to time from other companies.
LinkedIn has made it very easy to poach other people. Yes.
Professional dating.
So the more experienced engineer who's might have been with a company for a number of years, and what keeps an engineer to stay put at a company? What do companies have to do to adapt to changing technology out there, changing cultures?
So I'll tell you some testimonials, at least from staff that we've had from other companies. They tell us that they just love working here, how well we treat them, and then the fun that they have here. And I'm at a disadvantage because I've only worked at Edmund, right? But when we do get a lot of folks from other companies working with us, they just talk up about how collaborative the environment is, and we
thinking in my head,
hear that from a lot of people, and then other companies as well too, of how important that is, that they can have someone to count on to help them with their job. It's not, I'm going to figure out how to do something and keep it to myself and never tell anyone else. It's not this dog-eat-dog kind of a situation, and they really value that. And there's a cost to that, and I think those folks are willing to work at a place, even if it means making 10% less than some other place where the environment is going to be a lot more hostile.
Yeah, I think how you handle all that, things like force ranking and highly competitive, like group against group within companies, which is kind of a fad, I think, right now as well, out maybe on the West Coast especially, tends to keep you working there for just a little while, right? It's very exciting. You're working all this really cool, neat stuff,
It
but
gets old fast.
It gets old fast,
Right.
right? And that high paycheck doesn't go far because you've also got all the high cost of living out there. So I think, if you really want to be in it for the long haul, you have to kind of put those things aside and really focus on the individual, continuing their education, continuing their enrichment and all that other, to try to foster that person, not just the company's bottom line.
Well, Nathan, share firsthand, right?
Yeah, right.
You've worked elsewhere and then
Sure,
joined here. And
that collaborative comment was exactly what I was thinking, is sort of, I don't feel like I'm on an island. I feel like I can go to the next desk or the next office and say, hey, what do you think about this idea? Or I'm having trouble with that thing, and not have to worry about that person poaching my idea or, stabbing me in the back or any of that other stuff like I might have felt elsewhere, but sort of, more like, yeah, we're all in this together. We're all kind of moving toward the same goal. And I think, fostering that attitude is huge.
Well, and I think fostering it, that's a perfect point. I think if you as a company think your employee base is just going to automatically default to working great as teams, I think that's a huge misconception. I think Edmund Optics has a very explicit kind of internal mandate about building company culture and hiring for company culture. And you hear people at conferences say, oh, it seems like people really enjoy working at Edmund Optics, and it's not by accident. This has been a very purposeful, long time working on the company culture to build that collaborative environment and treating employees with respect and appreciating them. So I think companies that just expect that's going to happen, that's a misstep. So maybe they have other things to offer. Maybe if you're a very driven engineer in a very specific field, you want to work for a company that's going to move things forward at whatever the cost to your employees and things. I'm thinking like the Tesla, SpaceX, Elon Musk model where you hear 100-hour work weeks and this, but you're working towards moving humanity forward. Like that's exciting to some people, and they're willing to sacrifice all of their work-life balance and things. But that's the company culture that you're going into. So I think being outward about what your company culture is a better way to match the employee coming in with what the company's offering.
Well, and at a more tactical level, I think a lot of successful companies do well when they have, at the lower levels of management, just a lot of touch time and one-on-one time and just a lot of attention paid to employees' needs, and make sure you have that active feedback loop. And I would say that that's something that I've seen in some groups work, and then in other groups, when it's not there, you see sort of divergent paths, and the next thing you know, it's like, why are you working on that? And you know, just as long as you're constantly taking the temperature of your employees and constantly responding to their needs, and because a lot of people, like say, you know, they grow over time in their career, and maybe they don't necessarily belong in that department anymore, and so rigid hierarchy structures in companies a lot of times work against them, and you know, I'd say here we tend to have a bit more of a fluid situation, which can be confusing at times, but it's also a huge asset in a lot of ways, because I've never felt the pressure that I have to like walk down this hallway, or that, you know, there's only these options that I see in front of me. It's always just kind of like, well, someday if I wanted to switch gears into something else, I feel like I can make that pitch.
Options beyond your day-to-day, I think, is definitely something that experienced folks coming to work here have really taken advantage of and really liked. And just imagine someone who you're hiring because they're a mechanical expert and that's what you need. But here they are at an optics company, and you tell them, if you'd like, you know, we could teach you some of the optics, and you can get involved in that too. Now this is, you know, someone who may have had 20 years in their industry, and they're not expecting to learn anything new or anything different. And if they're the type of person who has got that curious engineering mind, which most likely they are, they love the fact that they have the ability to do that, to learn something outside of their own expertise and expand their horizons. That's definitely been a critical thing that we've gotten feedback from folks that have come here who've worked elsewhere and had a lot of experience in other things.
So you just said feedback, and Joel just also used the term feedback. I was going to say one of the important things that I think a lot of companies don't do is get feedback from their employees, and also provide feedback, because you're never growing as an employee without feedback. And so, you know, I think a lot of what companies don't do great is performance reviews. So they're always so loaded, right? You know, it's like, oh, am I doing a bad job or a good job? And you're getting it maybe like once a year, you know, and that's so, you know, in my mind, you should know where you stand with your boss and your employees.
You shouldn't be surprised.
It shouldn't be a surprise at a performance review, but a lot of companies like share all this feedback all at one shot in this really loaded conversation that's tied to your salary.
And then it's usually only the feedback that they can remember
for the last 3 months or what somebody else said. Or, so, you know, in my mind, having an active conversation both up and down in your reporting lines, you know, and being able to receive feedback is also terribly loaded. I mean, everything, you know, for most people, feedback is like a direct attack on your person, and, you know, defensive-ness is your immediate response. So
that's key, right? I mean, all three of you have given me some feedback that made me change my behavior. That was, you know, at times maybe pushing things in the wrong direction.
Because he was watching Star Trek and Star Wars again, right?
That's true. That's true.
Stop working with him.
But no, I mean, I distinctly remember a lunch, Katie, where I was asking you, for some input on a few recent events, and it was, I think that we came out of that quite a bit healthier, and I think if you have that traditional boss employee relationship where it is just one-way communication and maybe thin at best in that direction, I think that's where you just get off on the wrong foot. So if it's strong in both directions, I think that's where you end up in a much better spot.
Right, and as a manager, you see the signs if your employee isn't happy where they are. Maybe they're an engineer that's wanting to learn things and they're stagnating in their current role, and goes back to the retention. How are you retaining your employee? Well, if you don't ever get feedback from your employee or know where they stand, how, you know, you can't keep them growing in their career.
And doing it often.
Right. Right.
It takes a lot of time as a manager to do that, right? And so you have to have the company actually saying, you know, yes, take that time.
Right, supporting that effort.
Worthwhile, right? People are political, and fundamentally, that's just how we are, right? And so, again, you have to kind of build a culture intentionally to sort of diffuse that. Yes, everybody likes to build little empires or have their thing that's like, you know, look, I love this thing, I've been working on it for years, and it's my baby, and, you know, I want to foster it, and I want to take care of it, and I want it to be mine. I'm like, well, yeah, that's nice, but you know, we're all in this as a team, and so still being open to that feedback and open to other people's ideas. That the company has to be able to foster that, or else that sort of happens on its own.
Right.
Understand that improvement is not about just pointing to an employee what's wrong with them and,
Right.
and what they
Right.
need to change,
Right.
but
Here's your
more
mistake.
you know,
But here's what you did really well.
it should be about career development,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that's really the point of the review, right? And you want to develop that employee and give them suggestions that's going to help them go to the next level, not just correct what you see as negative.
And together come up with a plan to get there.
That's
Because I think it's, you can say, where do you want to be in 5 years, but I mean, it might just be this esoteric kind of, goal that you have, but how do you actually make it happen?
Hold each
Yeah,
other
yeah.
accountable for the employee and manager accountable for that plan that you come up with.
And we do invest in our employees, ongoing training and furthering their careers and stuff. I mean, I see that all the time. So it's also another good retention aspect is, these people have their own hopes and dreams, and, you want to foster them to get there, not just sort of, what can I get out of you?
Yeah, I think that's one thing that is difficult in the industry, and we see it with optics, is who is teaching the next, level and generation of engineers. You have, universities and community colleges that how are they going to attract people away from, industry and industry salaries to come in and teach? So it almost has to be a personal passion or altruism where you're doing, outreach and teaching. And so I do think that's important, but to me, in some ways, that has to be incentivized more, because you have to.
With tuition as high as it is, you would think that that's
Right.
not an issue.
Right.
So Ken, you had mentioned that you've been here at Edmund Optics your whole career. Did I hear that?
That's right. Yep, for about 19 years.
Wow. And then Nathan, you recently joined.
2 years.
Right. So I think there's that, every company faces that struggle of that right balance between hiring entry-level, homegrown talent and kind of going that way. Obviously, it takes longer, and also hiring someone fresh from another company and with the experience. What are your views on how does a company get that balance right? What
You definitely need a mixture of both, right?
Oh,
you
yeah.
need new ideas, and the only way you're going to sometimes get a lot of that is pulling in people from the outside that aren't necessarily doing things the way you're doing it, and be flexible. You may have your way of doing things, but always be willing to change and listen to suggestions and incorporate those things. And typically engineers that I've hired from outside of Edmund, engineers usually have strong opinions about things, right?
No. I don't know what you're talking about.
no comment.
And how they feel things should go. And I'll tell them, so you're going to have lots of suggestions, and they're going to be, everyone wants to just, first couple of days at the job, I want to show you my value and give you all my suggestions and everything. See how we do things and why we do things for maybe the first 3 to 6 months. Write all your suggestions down, right? So that you remember and you know them. At the end of those 3 to 6 months, there are going to be some that you already know are not going to make sense, because now you know a little bit more about the company, right? And then a couple of other ones that will make sense, and things we can incorporate, and not going to be able to change everything all at once, but encourage that, and don't look at it as a threat, but look at it as this part of your continuous improvement.
Yeah, it goes both ways, right?
Right.
I think we do a pretty good job here of taking that information, that feedback, those new ideas, and actually incorporating them. Not just like, this is the EO way, it's the only way we do things, just get to work, right? I think we do a pretty good job of, actually do come back with that, and we will listen to you, and we will try to find a way to, maybe it needs to be modified or mutated a little bit to fit into our processes, but nonetheless, maybe there are improvements that we can make. I think that's actually
Not
something
just
we've...
add the suggestions in the blue suggestion box.
Right, kind of,
in the
yeah.
trash can.
Right, but,
You keep from getting stale, right?
that's right, yeah.
Some of those old ways of doing things just don't necessarily make sense. I think you were making fun of discs earlier, right? I mean,
Yeah, right.
nobody
It's a
uses it
disc,
anymore. Everything's just over wires and clouds and things like that, which actually changes how we rev control drawings and how we
Take
actually
advantage of
store
new
data
technology.
and all of that. So it's constantly have to evolve.
So another workforce shift, not just in this industry, but many industries, is the shift to more independent contractors, consultants. Are we seeing that a lot in our industry, or and what does that mean?
Yeah, we
for us?
use consultants quite a bit. I mean, obviously, there's internal projects, but there's also times when maybe you don't have that person with just that right experience or skill set. So why not go out and find them? And maybe you don't have enough work to bring them in full time. So just use a consultant to get that kind of that passing gear to get through that project. I think that's increasingly something that a lot of companies do.
Adds flexibility to the workforce.
Absolutely.
You can handle spike demand in a particular area or point of time within the company, and not have that commitment to the employee full time. And especially if you're trying to create an environment where you're going to be invested in your employees, you want to make sure that when you take someone on, you're going to be able to support them as a permanent employee for a long period of time. Otherwise, if every 2 years you're seeing that new designer being let go for some reason, then that's going to be counterproductive to the type of environment that you're trying to create.
Yeah, and I think partly we are sort of reluctant to hire because we're reluctant to lay off, right? So, if you see a spike in demand, you're not going to necessarily hire up for it. You're going to maybe contact some consultants to get you through that. Whereas if you see kind of ongoing, continuing growth, then you hire for it. And that is something that may be somewhat unique to Edmund over other companies, is that real reluctance to do layoffs and careful hiring practice.
It provides a degree of flexibility too. So you're mentioning how it's kind of hard to get people to move and relocate and recruiting and whatnot, but sometimes you may just meet somebody that, we're in New Jersey, but maybe there's a perfectly viable candidate for an opening we have in Idaho, but they don't want to leave.
Right.
And so, okay, well, what else can we work out? And a lot of times an independent contractor arrangement will work out. In this instance, if it's a design, okay, here's some specs, please design this for me, and now I get to see you in action, and then we can maybe consider.
Good way to try before you buy.
Consider
right.
remote
Right.
employment after that as a permanent employee. But and if it doesn't go quite so well, and the communication isn't quite what you're expecting, then it's kind of no harm, no foul on both sides.
You find that a lot of candidates out there are preferring that contract model over permanent full-time employment?
I mean,
Are you
I think
running
it's
into
tougher.
that?
I mean, I was gonna say I think there's a lot of challenges when you go in doing personal consulting. You don't have the safety net of benefits and constant income. I think that's the main thing with consulting, is that your income can seriously fluctuate depending on what you're taking on or not. I think it gives you flexibility though to take on more or less work. So I think there's a lot of significant challenges, and you also have to be comfortable working in a very independent setting. I don't think somebody coming out and having 3 years of experience feels like they're ready to go,
Right.
unless they're in some sort of highly specialized new
We're
field.
talking experienced folks.
Yeah, you're talking somebody that's experienced, that's comfortable operating on their own. And I've heard even consultants, they usually have maybe other consultants that they use as a network
Sure.
to bounce
Yeah,
ideas off of,
absolutely.
because you don't want to work in a technical, creative technical field in a silo. So I think there's a lot of unique challenges to being a contractor. That's why you don't see everybody doing it, because it is lucrative. Sometimes you see the prices that a consultant gets paid, you think, oh my gosh, I should be a consultant. But you don't realize how much that's going to your
It's covering a lot of
Insurance.
risks.
covering your
and-
insurance and
Yeah,
benefits
right.
and risk
right.
and things like that.
Right.
So
And they've got a lot more hours that you put in, sort of managing all that, right? Setting up your next consulting
Yeah.
job or whatever.
You're running your
Not
own
to mention
small
business development.
Yeah, right. There's a lot there. So yeah, per hour it sounds like it's high, but I think
Right.
realistically it's not.
Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed the second part of our discussion on talent in the optics industry. Please leave us a comment to let us know what you think and to suggest other topics. Also, be sure to check out part 3 of this topic next, where we will discuss global challenges, corporate flexibility and employee accommodation, why employees leave, and apprenticeships.